you can buy that car even though you're in a pinch. Come to Grinnell, buy from West Finch. And when you give me $4,000 for a car you can trust, we got them by the dozen without any rust. Our prices are low, they won't make you flinch. Come to Grinnell, buy from West Finch.
The Van and Connie Show, the toast and jam of morning TV.
Oliver North drops a bombshell. He says Ronald Reagan knew everything about the Iran-Contra scandal.
This is NBC Nightly News, reported by Garrick, Utley.
Good evening. The suspicion has always been there, but not the evidence, that President Ronald Reagan knew more, much more, than he acknowledged about the Iran-Contra affair, that is, the effort to trade weapons for hostages and the diversion of money from that to the Contras fighting in Nicaragua. And now, Oliver North, a key inside figure, is pointing his finger at Ronald Reagan. Robert Hager in Washington. Is Oliver North now a smoking gun?
Well, Garrick, North says he didn't tell the president directly about the Iran-Contra affair, but he does say that he's convinced, more convinced than ever, that Reagan knew everything about it. Well, that's the first time we've heard that from Oliver North, and that's pretty close to a smoking gun. The disclosure comes in Time magazine, which has purchased excerpts of North's new book, Under Fire. In the book, North, who took the Fifth Amendment 5 years ago, says he was the fall guy who took the blame for the White House, and he suggests an administration cover-up. This contrasts with what was said at the time.
The only persons in the United States government that knew precisely about this, the only person was Lieutenant Colonel North.
But North says in the book, it's his opinion, just opinion, that Reagan knew everything. Time reporter Barrett Seaman, who writes an article to go with North's excerpts.
North is perfectly prepared to believe that Ronald Reagan just doesn't remember what he participated in, but he's quite convinced that at some point he knew what was happening.
In the article, North says about 100 people in our government knew at least some of what was being done, at least until what he calls the Great Plague of Amnesia hit Washington in the fall of 1986. North writes that the administration never asked him to tell the truth, and says the only message he heard was exonerate the president. North also writes about the late CIA director, William Casey. Again, Time reporter Barrett Seaman.
Casey knew everything North knew, as far as North can see, and North finds it very difficult to believe that Bill Casey, as close as he was to Ronald Reagan, didn't at some point go into the Oval Office and tell him what was going on.
Well, the writing of the book has been a closely held secret for the 2 years that it's been in the works. It was co-written by reporter William Novak. North says he didn't write it for revenge, but clearly he is bitter about what happened. The startling excerpts have now been released just a month after all criminal charges against North were dropped. Garrick?
Bob Hager in Washington, thank you. Well, the arms for hostages trade never did come off, and only now are there real hopes that all the hostages will be freed. And today, the wife of one of them was preparing for an important reunion. In Boise, Idaho, Bader Turner, the wife of Jesse Turner, said she is very eager to see her husband even for one moment. Yesterday, the kidnappers who have held her husband for almost 5 years said she can come to Lebanon to visit with her husband for 1 hour. 4-year-old daughter Joanne, who has never seen her father, will go too. The invitation came in a statement from the kidnappers, accompanied by a photograph of Turner. And now we turn from hope in the Turner family to the tragedy of Killeen, Texas. Today they began burying victims of the nation's worst mass murder there. And there is new information today about the man who killed them and what might have made him do it. Here's Jim Cummins.
There was a memorial service this afternoon for the 22 people who died in the Killeen Massacre. Earlier in the day, the first funeral. Family and friends paid their last respects to Pat Carney, one of 3 local school administrators gunned down in the cafeteria. Retired school teacher Carly Cochran was one of Pat Carney's friends.
We have to see the reality of it now, and we know that it could happen any day to any of us, and we should all be prepared.
But nobody was prepared for George Hennard Jr.'s 10 minutes of rage. He was a handsome loner, rejected by the Merchant Marines, rejected by the women who lived near the family mansion in Belton, Texas, rejected by this woman who knew him in Nevada and doesn't want to be identified.
To me, he seemed paranoid. He was very paranoid about people following him and about people having done him wrong. And he gave me the creeps, and that's why I didn't see him anymore, but I didn't think that he would ever have done something like this.
Hennard's parents are divorced. His father, a physician, lives in Houston, his mother in Nevada. They've said nothing so far.
I can just say that they're
they're as upset as probably the rest of all the families. They've been victims too, you know.
Hennard was an average student who did not participate in any high school activities, got an honorable discharge from the Navy. In recent months, he sent a bizarre letter to some neighbors revealing his hatred of women. That was after he had already purchased the murder weapons, one of them like this, from a gun dealer in Nevada.
All the paperwork is forwarded to our police department. We check to see if the subject is an ex-felon and is able to possess a firearm, which in this case he was not an ex-felon.
Today there was a report that in the aftermath of the massacre, police found a ticket stub in Hennard's pocket for the movie The Fisher King, which includes a scene of a deranged man massacring a crowd of people in a New York club. Some police investigators say they know nothing about the ticket stub. Last night, the high school decided not to postpone its homecoming football game despite the tragedy.
There's a lot of school pride here, and I think it really helps us at this time.
Many people here are going to need help for some time. Jim Cummins, NBC News.
And among those who died there on Wednesday is the story of the Gratias, Al and Ursula. They were having lunch with their daughter, Suzanne, on that fateful day. She says her father tried to stop George Hennard and was shot in the chest when he did. Susanna then tried to get her mother to escape with her through a smashed window in the back. She made it, but not her mother, who chose to stay behind to comfort her dying husband. And then she was shot in the head. Ursula and Al Gratia had been married for 48 years. Well, as we cover our world this day, we'll see next how a weak economy and a rising tax burden are angering many people across this nation. And also tonight, men and women at work. We'll see how one employer and employees are dealing with sexual harassment. There is something that can be done.
Everyone has a dream, a vision deep inside.
When I decide to follow up on an investing idea, I need a broker who's ready when I am.
We make it easier to follow your own lead.
I can call Schwab at any hour, nights or weekends, get the information I need, even place an order to trade.
Always there to give you just the help you need.
Help yourself at Schwab today.
You know, it's not something we talk about.
Then don't talk about it.
But when Raymond gets...
Gets what?
You know, constipated.
What?
I give him Phillips milk of magnesia.
Put that away.
Phillips works overnight and immediately starts soothing the stomach acid Ray sometimes gets when he's feeling...
Oh, Maureen.
Well, it's true, honey.
Only Phillips relieves constipation overnight and soothes your upset stomach.
It can happen to anybody.
But you don't even know these people.
The financial squeeze just about everyone feels it these days. State governments which are trying to raise taxes to cover enormous deficits. People who are being asked to pay more or new taxes. And when people feel squeezed too much, they react. Today, taxpayer demonstrations were held across the country. The message was simple: enough is enough. Here's Jeff Madrick.
Right into the Constitution, basic protections for taxpayers.
In Detroit, the issue was property taxes. In Stamford, Connecticut, the new income tax. In New Jersey, last year's $3 billion tax hike. In the biggest rally of the day, several thousand turned out in Kingston, New York to protest proposed new tax hikes in the state, making activists out of people like Jennifer Steinberger, working mother of two, who never demonstrated about anything before.
I'm working so hard, and what for? And they just keep on, you know, next minute you know you're getting hit with another tax. And I don't think they're going to stop because they don't stop spending.
But economists say it is not only taxes that are squeezing Americans, but also other costs that are rising even faster. In 1960, all federal, state, and local taxes were about 15% of an American's income. They are now up to 20%. Interest payments on consumer and mortgage debt since 1960 have doubled. Medical payments have more than doubled as a percentage of Americans' income. This adds up to what one economist calls a misery index, amounting to 23% of an American's income in 1960, and now 40%.
Because the misery index is at a record high, the consumer just doesn't have enough money left over to spend on clothing, cars, whatever. If they're weak, the overall economy will be weak.
To Jennifer Steinberger, it's the government who is to blame.
To me, they're responsible for the economy the way it is. I'm scared for us, but also for my children. What are they going to have?
A growing number of people are blaming the government, although taxes are only one of the factors that account for the average American's current economic misery. Jeff Madrick, NBC News, New York.
Well, if taxpayers feel caught in the financial squeeze, so do elected officials. A good example, New Jersey. Last year, Governor James Florio pushed through the biggest tax increase in that state's history. Governor Florio is with us this evening from New Jersey. Governor, good evening. What do you tell the people we just heard in this report who say they have had enough of paying taxes? What can you tell them?
Well, in New Jersey, it's a bit easier because this year we passed a budget that had a $2.5 billion property tax reduction program. But I think the concerns that people are expressing are very real. In large measure, the national recession is causing great hardship to people. And over and above that, the federal government is shifting back onto the states and to people an awful lot of costs, particularly the medical cost piece. Medical costs are starting to hurt people, and we're going to have to start formulating some policies that are going to help people get through these difficult times when costs are really pushing them to the edge.
Okay, so they sound like very good and sound reasons, but to what extent can you ask taxpayers to go to the well again and again to keep paying for these programs as an elected official?
Garrick, the answer is you can't. And therefore, you've got to start trimming costs. We've been doing that in our state. We cut the cost of the centralized part of our government, and we're trying to provide some programs that are going to be able to reduce some of the redundancies and the inefficiencies in government.
Now, Governor, many people pay their tax money, particularly middle-class, middle-income people. They see much of that money going to needs which would not affect them directly, the poor, inner cities. Now, these are real needs, and yet these people may not want to pay for that. Isn't that a problem that elected officials are going to face, and how do you answer that?
Well, the answer is that you're going to have to start taking care of some of the concerns of middle-class people. We've got a college tuition program to provide assistance to middle-income people who are trying to put their children through school. Likewise, we're trying to put together some programs for first-time middle-income home buyers. So we're going to have to start economizing and then be addressing the needs of middle-class people as well as the people at the bottom of the income spectrum.
All righty. Governor Florio of New Jersey, thank you for being with us. We'll see what the taxpayers' final response is going to be. Well, turning to other political news, in Louisiana today, politics, it's primary day in the race for governor. They're open to voters of all parties. There are 12 candidates, and experts say the race is too close to call in Louisiana. Former Klan leader David Duke, a Republican, ran strong in pre-election polls within 1% of Republican Governor Buddy Roemer and Democratic former Governor Edwin Edwards. If, as expected, nobody wins a clear majority of the votes, the top two finishers will run against each other next month. In Yugoslavia, there is another so-called truce in that country's civil war, truce number 10, although you might not know it there. Croatian radio reports rocket and artillery attacks on some towns today, and a convoy carrying seriously wounded people from one besieged Croatian city came under mortar fire, then hit a landmine. 2 nurses were badly hurt. The rescue group Doctors Without Borders had planned a second convoy to rescue more of the wounded, but called it off after the first incident. More than 1,000 people have died so far in the fighting in Yugoslavia. And we'll have more news as we continue here in just one moment.
If you don't have AT&T 800 service and something happens, who knows how long you could be out. But if you do have AT&T, you're automatically protected by the 800 Assurance Policy. Not only that, since AT&T connects calls faster and has the fewest blocked calls, more 800 calls get through. So you can make more sales. Better service, better results. Another AT&T advantage. Call about our 800 offer.
It's 6 o'clock. You're coming home for supper tonight. You work all day. You work up an appetite.
Hey, Mom, what's for dinner?
I wonder what minute is cooking up for dinner tonight.
How about stir-fried chicken and broccoli in a tangy oriental sauce with Minute Rice? Because Minute Rice makes all your recipes taste great. Now that's something to come home to.
Just look 1 minute. It's cooking up for dinner tonight.
Don't get hit by an annual fee. Carry the card that doesn't charge one. And keep yourself out of the hole. It pays to discover.
In art, taste is subjective, but in life,
Good taste is well defined. Fancy Feast gourmet cat food. Exceptionally moist and delicious. Fancy Feast. Good taste is easy to recognize.
On Focus this evening, we look beyond the battle over Clarence Thomas to see what is being done about sexual harassment in this country. How widespread is it? Well, our latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll asked that question. The response, 63%, almost two-thirds, said it occurs at all or most workplaces. That opinion was shared equally by men and women. What can be done about it? In Los Angeles, Keith Morrison shows us.
He walked up and just blew in my ear, right in front of my supervisor and my coworkers, and that actually was the final straw.
It happened right around here, room 319 of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, where Carol Serrar made one of the toughest decisions of her life.
I felt almost guilty even bringing it to the department. I thought they actually handled it very well.
Serrar's complaint brought down one of the top men in this huge public company. They call it the DWP, a nuts and bolts utility that, because of one simple philosophy, is miles ahead of most of the country on the issue of workplace harassment.
We can't afford to waste our human potential, our employees. We have to use them all. In terms of the evaluation of credibility...
And that is why, week after week, it's a top-ranking executive named Beverly King who calls in employees to drum in the message.
It's not sex at all. It's power. It's power expressed in the workplace.
Ain't she the cutest little thing? Now, all you got to do is just sit here and look pretty for my clients, all right, honey?
They watch countless video recreations, definitions of harassment.
Never you mind, pussycat.
And if the program here works, it's because King and her staff are prepared to poke in sensitive places, to encourage victims to come forward, even if it launches investigations at least as painful as what we've seen in Washington.
This case has had 16 days of testimony, 45 witnesses, and is ongoing as we speak.
And does this sound familiar?
It's very uncomfortable. The situations have to be described in detail. It's very painful.
It's a pain this company willingly accepts time and time again.
We've investigated in about the last 10 years over 100 cases of sexual harassment in our workplace.
She did not raise... And though the DWP emphasizes healing too, ask Carol Serrar, who watched the Thomas hearings, about healing.
At times when I'd be watching the television, I would get extremely angry, and other times I just turn it off. I couldn't watch it.
The DWP is committed to this because many of its traditionally male jobs are now being taken by women, which is true, of course, in much of corporate America, in many companies that don't have similar programs.
The ones that don't are missing quite a bit.
But for all its effort, the DWP misses a lot too. 30% of this company's workers still report they have seen or felt sexual harassment. In a company with a program that works, some women refuse to talk to us at all for fear of upsetting friendships, jobs, security.
I think we've learned what works, but I think we still have a lot more learning to do.
Keith Morrison, NBC News, Los Angeles.
And looking at that report, we should also pass on this footnote to the Clarence Thomas hearings. The question there, of course, was, whom did you believe, Thomas or Anita Hill? National polls show that most Americans believe Thomas. But now, well, the National Law Journal has asked 100 state and federal judges what their personal and professional verdict was. 41% said they found Hill's testimony to be more credible. That's almost twice the 22% of judges who believed Thomas. The rest were undecided.
1874, the first transatlantic cable connecting Ireland and America. It was made by Siemens. That was then. This is now. Today, Siemens makes telephone switches that handle 1 million calls in a single hour, carry voice, text, and data on a single phone line. And at 23 research sites in America, the people of Siemens are developing technologies to connect us all to the future. Siemens, precision thinking.
It's gone. But it isn't.
Vicks introduces an incredible new cough drop.
It's gone, but it isn't.
A cough drop so powerful, it keeps on working even after the drop is gone. It's extra strength Vicks, a new kind of Vicks with twice the Vicks vapor medicine to relieve your cough and help your scratchy throat and stuffy nose feel better, even after the drop is gone. New extra strength Vicks, extra strong to work
even after it's gone.
As we approach the 1992 Olympic Games, many are striving to be their best. They call him Iron Legs. But Richard Lowe isn't an athlete. He's a letter carrier on some of the cruelest hills in San Francisco. The 750,000 workers of the Postal Service are proud to sponsor the 1992 Olympic Games and share with you the quest to be the best.
We deliver for you! You gotta agree. Pizza or cheeseburger?
Domino's just what you want. Nobody knows like Domino's. Domino's Pizza's Bacon Cheeseburger Pizza Feast. A medium pizza piled high with ground beef, bacon, and an extra layer of cheese. Nobody knows like Domino's. We don't make your pizza till you make your call. So call for a Bacon Cheeseburger Pizza Feast. Now just $8.99. 2 for $12.99. Nobody knows like Domino's. How you like pizza at home?
Time now to look at some of the top stories in the news this past week. The Clarence Thomas hearings were not a high-tech lynching after all. Yesterday, he was sworn in as a Supreme Court justice. The massacre in Killeen, Texas was a horror. And one day after it happened, the House of Representatives voted down a gun control measure which would have outlawed the kind of ammunition clips George Hennard used. There was conflicting news about the economy. The stock market at a record high, new housing starts down, and Congress failed to override the president's veto of a bill to extend unemployment benefits. Overseas, Aung San Suu Kyi won the Nobel Peace Prize, but she may not even know that. The leader of the opposition to Burma's dictatorship has been under arrest and unseen for more than a year. In Moscow, Mikhail Gorbachev signed an economic agreement with most of his Soviet republics. But his top economic advisor warns that the country and its economy may be, quote, headed for hell. And then the big good news, Secretary of State James Baker is heading home from the Middle East. The long-sought peace conference finally seems to be at hand. And so what does this mean? Lead to a conference on the Middle East? Yes, in Madrid starting a week from this coming Wednesday. But talking does not mean peace. In Israel, Martin Fletcher explains the goals and the obstacles that lie ahead.
With a big stick and a big smile, it looks like James Baker's pulled it off, stage one at least. After 8 trips around the Middle East, countless hours of persuasion and veiled threats, for the first time Israel will sit down face to face with Syria, Saudi Arabia, its Arab enemies. But the smiles could get wiped off pretty quick. Talking about peace is one thing, making it quite another.
The peace conference can't make peace. It will just convene, and nobody will want to pull out because nobody will want to take the onus of pulling out, get blamed. But it will just run on with fewer and fewer sessions and no problems resolved and no peace made.
Why? It's almost impossible to find anybody optimistic that the key issues, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, Jerusalem, will be solved through compromise. The Golan Heights, Syria insists on getting it all back, no conditions. Israel says never, and even if, it must remain demilitarized forever. The West Bank, the Palestinians want it all. The Israelis say never, not 1 inch. And to emphasize that, are settling the area faster than ever before. Jerusalem, such a tough one that everyone agrees. Don't mention it till last or the conference will fall apart. Amid all the politics, it's easy to forget that the issue that divides Arab and Jew is a simple one, land. And in this one house near Jerusalem, all the elements collide. Jews stake a biblical claim to the land and say they bought it. Arabs say no, they've lived here for 20 years. They'll meet in court. So what does Iman Abu Mayala think of the chances of the peace conference?
It's impossible to make peace with them.
If Israel's Prime Minister does appear to be compromising on any of the key issues, his right wing will revolt immediately.
We will resign. We will leave the coalition.
Threats also from Palestinian extremists. Any compromise by the Palestinian delegation would lead to violence and revolt. The hope, though, is that once Jews and Arabs start talking, a dynamic will set in that will sweep aside fear and hatred. A slim hope may be, but it's still the best hope there's ever been for peace here. Martin Fletcher, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
And today, Secretary of State Baker was asked to put odds on the success of the Mideast Conference. He wisely refused to do so, saying, quote, "We are dealing here with the Middle East."
If you don't have AT&T 800 service and something happens, who knows how long you could be out. But if you do have AT&T, you're automatically protected by the 800 assurance policy. Not only that, since AT&T connects calls faster and has the fewest blocked calls, more 800 calls get through, so you can make more sales. Better service, better results. Another AT&T advantage. Call about our 800 offer.
It's 6 o'clock. You're coming home for supper tonight. You work all day. You work up an appetite.
Hey, Mom, what's for dinner?
I wonder what minute is cooking up for dinner tonight.
How about stir-fried chicken and broccoli in a tangy Oriental sauce with minute rice? Because minute rice makes all your recipes taste great. Now that's something to come home to.
Just look for a minute. It's cooking up for dinner tonight.
Where do you want to be in 5 years?
I had an old Studebaker truck and $300 when I started this company. In a few years, my sons will be ready to take over, and then I'd like to... I never told anybody this. I want to live in Paris and go to cooking school. Hey, that's what I want to do. Will I have the money to do it?
You can get there from here with Shearson Lehman Brothers.
When you get gas pain, you've got a choice. Your antacid or Gas X, the tablet made for gas pain. It's extra strength, 100% simethicone to get rid of gas faster than your antacid. Fight gas right with Gas X.
And finally this evening, earlier in our program, we saw and heard from some angry taxpayers, and there are many in this country. Why are so many Americans complaining? Let me share this idea with you. American tax rates today are, relatively speaking, low. Repeat, low. About half the top of rates in the rest of the industrialized world. Our sales taxes are equally low. Fact, the United States is a tax bargain, believe it or not. The difference, of course, is that in other countries, people see their tax money coming back to them to make life more agreeable and secure. In Western Europe, health care for everyone. In Scandinavia, daycare centers for mothers and children. In Japan, modern, efficient cities that work. In this country, though, people don't see the same return on their tax money. More seems to be going out than is coming back in services. That perception is going to put more pressure on politicians and government leaders to deliver the goods that are being paid for. Yes, of course, that will mean less spent on the military. It also means the government staying awake at the switch so there are no more S&L bailouts costing $500 billion. One of the truisms of life is, quote, you get what you pay for. If you're not getting it, you get angry. And that's why taxpayers are angry. It's not very complicated. And that is our look at our world this day. Join us tomorrow morning for Sunday Today and Meet the Press. Our guests on Meet the Press will be the leaders in the U.S. Senate, George Mitchell and Bob Dole, and we'll be back here tomorrow night. I'm Garrick Utley. Good night for all of us at NBC News.
Tax the taxes! Set me free! How much was taken out of your pocket this week, and you sit there in your cars, and you don't come out?
Attention Murphy Brown fans. This Monday night, Murphy Brown is a repeat. Look what NBC has instead. Danielle Steele's bestsellers. Lee Horsley in Palomino. Patrick Duffy and Linda Carter in Daddy. Two of Danielle Steele's hottest. Palomino Monday, Daddy Wednesday, both on NBC.
You thought you'd seen the last of her. You were wrong.
All new. I Still Dream of Jeannie, the movie, NBC Sunday.
Coming up next on News Center 13.
Friends and family bid farewell to 11-year-old murder victim Roslin Barnes. I'm Mary Mills. I'll have that story.
This crack cocaine was confiscated during last night's shooting at TNT Lounge.
And it was a homecoming thriller in Iowa City. Pat with all the highlights.
These stories plus Jerry with a chilly forecast, all ahead on the news at 6.
Nelson's Diamonds in Ankeny invites you to discover their custom jewelry. Every piece you see here was custom designed by one of Nelson's 3 in-store jewelers using diamonds or precious colored gems from their hand-picked inventory. In addition to your basic jewelry needs, Nelson's also offers appraisals and 24-hour jewelry repair, and your fine jewelry never leaves the store. Choose from a wide selection of custom-made jewelry or create your own family heirloom to pass down from generation to generation. Nelson's Diamonds, 324 South Ankeny Boulevard in Ankeny.
Hi there.
People keep coming back to Cost Cutters. All over the country, all year long. For convenience, professional stylists, price,
We're here.
the way they're treated, for quality. That's why, for complete family hair care, people keep coming back to Cost Cutters.
You're watching WHO TV 13 Des Moines, your 24-hour news source. This is News Center 13 at 6.
The family of 11-year-old Roslin Barnes said a final goodbye to their daughter today, but the search to find her killer is just beginning. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. A sad day in Des Moines' Model City neighborhood.
Today, family and friends laid to rest 11-year-old Roslin Barnes. The little girl was strangled to death last week near Altoona. News Center 13's Mary Mills was at the service, and she joins us from the newsroom now. Mary, it was a difficult day for those who knew and loved Roslin.
Yes, it was, Teresa. As the pastor said, you just don't expect children to die, especially the way Roslin did. And if there was any comfort to be found by the family today, it had to be in knowing that so many other people shared in their sorrow. Family, friends, and neighbors of 11-year-old Roslin Barnes came to Trinity United Methodist Church to say goodbye, to mourn the death of a little girl whose life had barely begun. It wasn't easy. There were lots of tears, lots of conflicting emotions, sadness, anger, and despair. Inside, Pastor Brian Carter talked about the difficulty in understanding such a senseless and horrifying death. He told the family there was nothing he could say or do to take away the pain, but hoped they might find comfort in knowing the community shared in their grief. During her short life, Roslin seemed to have left a lasting impression on many. One of her teachers and a church counselor both told of a little girl filled with energy and love of life, a little girl with an infectious laugh and a never-ending smile. Active in school, church, and scouting, they say she was always eager to help others. As they left the church, many were overcome with emotion. The tragedy of it all was sinking in. Roslin Barnes will be missed. And I think it's important to point out, too, that some of the people who attended today's funeral didn't even know Roslin personally, but they were touched enough by what happened that they wanted to show their support for the family. Therese?
A sad day. Thanks again, Mary Mills, reporting for us. Even as Roslin Barnes' family laid her to rest, authorities were working to charge the suspect in her murder. Charles Lesage was taken into custody yesterday. Police say his arrest is for parole violations, including having contact with children. And even though the arrest is unrelated to the murder investigation, they've hinted that it was a good way to keep Lesage here while the murder investigation continues. Police believe if Lesage is guilty, he did not act alone, and they are questioning other possible suspects. And what's next for Lesage? A parole revocation hearing must be set. Detectives are waiting for lab tests on his car that should be in next week. And New York investigators are still looking for a link between the Barnes murder and the unsolved murder of a little girl there.
Wapello County authorities say tonight an Ottumwa police officer who shot and killed a man Wednesday did so in self-defense. John Hill was shot at this house by police officer Greg Francisco. State medical examiner Tom Bennett says the victim died from massive blood loss. Hill's family members claim the victim was unarmed at the time of the shooting. But County Attorney William Apple says a 9mm revolver belonging to Hill was found at the scene. The family also says Hill may have lived if an ambulance was dispatched to the scene sooner. But transcripts of a police radio traffic shows an ambulance was dispatched within 3 minutes of that shooting. A shooting at the TNT Lounge earlier this morning sent one man to the hospital. Police say it may have been drug-related. According to police reports, one man was shot in the leg and taken to Broadlawns Hospital. Officials also say one person was taken into custody. An undetermined amount of crack cocaine and money was confiscated at the scene. The incident is still under investigation.
Des Moines police are still searching for 2 gunmen who held up the drug mart on East 28th last night. The pharmacist at the drug mart says 2 men entered the store and threatened himself and his clerk with what looked like a shotgun. The clerk was forced to the floor while they emptied the till and took drugs from the pharmacy. Luckily, no one was injured. New developments tonight in the investigation of an accident last Saturday that killed 3 people. State Patrol says when this accident happened on I-35, the blood alcohol level of 27-year-old Anthony Akes was .316. The legal limit is .1. Akes was killed when he hit one car head-on and then was hit by a semi. Authorities say Akes was driving the wrong way on the freeway, causing that accident that killed 2 other people and 24 hogs that were in that semi.
Police in Sioux City tonight investigating the grisly murders of 2 teenagers this morning. 24-year-old Carl Wade Lemke of Sioux City is accused of stabbing a 13-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl in a trailer home this morning. Now, Lemke lived in the home where the murders took place, but it's still unclear why the teenagers were there. He was taken into custody in Forest City late this afternoon.
Pro-life advocates gathered in Des Moines today for the state Right to Life convention. Organizers say the convention serves as an inspirational and motivational session for Right to Lifers. This past year has been very eventful for pro-life advocates, and that they feel that they have gained a lot of ground, especially with the approval of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court.
Vice President Dan Quayle will be in Sioux City tomorrow to give the keynote address to a conference of Midwestern governors. The conference began today with 10 Midwest governors attending. The group plans to tackle a number of issues, including school reform, national education goals, and Medicaid reform. Quayle's address will deal with White House domestic policy.
Well, it may cost a little more to heat your home this winter, and we'll tell you why.
And thanks to a helping hand from these men, the winter months will be a little warmer for the elderly and handicapped in Des Moines. We'll explain. Stay with us.
From the busy streets of Des Moines to Ames and Iowa Falls, your quality Buick dealers bring you the car famous for world-class quality. LeSabre, all new for $1992 with fresh new styling.